friends and colleagues. It's really my privilege to welcome you to the 148th episode of the webinar series called Rethinking City. We have been running for the last 5 years. I'm particularly delighted at the new series, which will have 6 chapters, is on cities of Odisha. This has been in planning for quite some time, and I'm delighted that even though a bit late, it is seeing the light of the day. And for that, I'm indebted to Preeti ji for making it possible. She has worked hard in conceiving the series, putting ideas and people together, and taking responsibility for moderating them. It is no exaggeration or overstatement to say that but for her efforts, this would not have been possible. And I'm not pretending, Preeti, thank you very much, but for you, this would not have happened. This webinar is the first on Odisha Urban Vision 2036 and is titled Building a Learning and Governance Ecosystem for Future-Ready Cities. I like this very much. Hard to imagine a better title and a better subject when it comes to planning and managing our cities. It's only appropriate that at this juncture, I also thank the core organizers of this webinar series. So thank you, Socratus. Thank you, Development Alternatives. Thank you, Gram Vikas. And thank you, XIM University. I'm particularly delighted, and even though it's not there, I'm mentioning this, that Gram Vikas is a partner. And I'm grateful to Libby Johnson Bhai for this prompt positive response when we approached him. Far too long, we have seen rural and urban in silos, and that is harming both the sectors. If the dream of Viksit Bharat and $30 trillion economy is to be realized, it is important that we start seeing urban and rural as a continuum, two different stages of growth and two entities which must grow and contribute to growth together. Let me also thank Umi Daniel ji. Thank you, Umi Saab. Dr. Tathagata Chatterji. I was just telling him that without him, I cannot think of a webinar. Libby is not there, but thank you very much for your consent. Abha ji of UNDP Odisha, and Sneha Mishra ji of Aaina, who has very gracefully accepted our last minute. You were slated for next session, so just upgraded and brought you in this particular one. I'm going to leave it to Preeti ji to tell you more about this series, as it is about Odisha's urbanization and Odisha's cities. And she has played a key role in designing this series. It's only better that she talks about what it is and how it is. She will tell you how this series will unfold in coming 2-3 months. But let me take 2 minutes to tell you why we are doing this series for the past 5 years and what it is for. For those who may not know, let me tell you that this is 148th episode of the series we call Rethinking City. We had over 600 urban experts and professionals, both national and international, share their views, perspectives, and solutions on over 40 urban themes and sub-themes. In terms of knowledge products, we have more than 300 hours of recording on the urban challenge on the subject as diverse as climate change, municipal finance, public transport, affordable house, you name it, and we have it. A book on urban conservation was done 2 years ago, and a new one with over 50 chapters written by some 90 authors from all over the world is being published by the world-renowned publisher Routledge. It is appropriately called City Economy in Global South, Growth, Inclusion, and Sustainability. And I'm very delighted to tell you that one of the editors of the book, Dr. Tathagata Chatterji, is sitting in this meeting as a panelist. So thank you, Tathagata Saab. But for you, we would not have made that book. Over the past 4 or 5 years, while introducing these webinars INHAF is organized on Rethinking City, I've emphasized the following points unfailingly and repeatedly, to the extent that they bore you. But I repeat them because I think it's necessary. Number one, that India's urban challenge is daunting, complex, and demanding. There's something that we as people, as professionals, as governance, as government cannot afford mismanaging without paying a big price economically and socially, as the country's future is tied to how the cities function and remain livable, healthy, safe, peaceful, productive, resilient, and undestructive. Undestructive of environment, undestructive of ecology, undestructive of nature, undestructive of culture, and undestructive of values. This is the first thing that I always say. Second thing I say, the time is not on our side. As pace of urbanization is rapid, governance challenge is formidable, and available responses do not seem to work very well. This is the crux of the issue, that we do not have solutions that work. Third thing is that to expect the government alone to respond to the challenge is neither reasonable nor realistic. Fourth, that the human resource capital, and this is very dear to me, that the human resource capital, including the knowledge and skill base outside the government system, in business, in industry, in academic community, among professionals and civil society, has the potential to contribute meaningfully to addressing the challenge. That this is the most important one. There are a large number of people and large amount of abilities outside the system. What is very important is to tap them. And the last is a wider societal partnership with the government in a key role is the need of the hour to meeting the urban challenge adequately. This effort that we are making for the last 5 years is a very small, very tiny, very minuscule contribution to building a societal partnership to meet the challenge adequately, to make our cities clean, healthy, livable, resilient, and sustainable. So with this longish introduction, over to you, Preeti ji, is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirtiji. You've really helped us kind of situate Odisha's vision under the broader journey towards our 2036 and 2047. But something very exciting is that while you were speaking, I just kind of realized that The moment that we had started conversing around why should we do a webinar and how important it was the shift of governments after steady 25 years. Odisha was seeing a new governance system, and we were all excited to see how and what that does mean for the state. And that was one of the moments when we decided that let us think through about urbanization as a concept for Odisha. And I think some of our interaction during that course had been that Odisha is in a place of opportunity because currently, with a 17% urbanization rate, we do look at urbanization being a growth mover in the state. And at least the government is more proactive in terms of pushing it to 40% right now. So, a biggest takeaway from what you said is that no single institution can deliver this transformation. We'll require stronger institution, maybe better planning, empowered communities, of course. And the inclusive growth can come only with cross-sector partnership. And that's why the launch event was designed in a manner that we wanted to see from different facet. How beautifully can we look at the vision document and see how. Um, while I was setting my tone for today's conversation, actually, exactly a year ago, while we were discussing this, the vision document was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister. So, and it was done on June 2025. So, exactly 368 days later, we are sitting as a point of reflection and trying to understand what has moved and how differently can we look at this altogether. Um, a lot of us have seen in this 1 year how some of the programs have been launched, some of the declaration have been done. And as we move towards the Viksit Bharat and Viksit Odisha narrative, and we reflect, and it'll be a great reflection for some of the speakers today to see that what does the document say and how far have we moved? What does it take it to make it real? And not only we limit ourselves with the vision document, because the idea of the webinar was to pick up city and then kind of navigate our ways in terms of understanding that if you're talking about a Raulkela or Barampur or Raigada, Puri, for that sake, in Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, all of the big names that have often been positioned when we talk about Odisha city, how are they taking and looking at urbanization altogether? Odisha has also a greater mix of tier 2, tier 3 cities. There are also villages and urban settlements coming on the peripheries of it. So while not being 100% urbanized, it's also at that space where we can shift the gears in terms of understanding how some of this can happen. So while the next course of the decadal journey is being marked, and we are in a very fortunate position because some of the speakers today are amazing in their own spaces, but not to kind of continue in what I'm trying to bring. And I think I will navigate during the course of the conversation into how and why this was designed. I would like to bring into the conversation Abhaji, and she has been with UNDP Orissa for a very long period of time, close to 3 decades. And she has extensively worked on sustainable development, governance, and localization of the SDGs in Orissa. And I think it's a very instrumental because when we think about urbanization, a lot of our narrative is drawn from the global. And the UNDP's SDG alignment has been something very significant for the government of Orissa, and she has kind of contributed towards it. So, Abhaji, welcome to the webinar today. And I would start off with the conversation asking you that as we move from vision to implementation, and we see that UNDP has supported Odisha in shaping the Urban Vision 2036, beyond creating an SDG aligned framework, what is the larger ambition that you see the governments looking together? Is it about better data, financing, institutional capabilities, or governance model? What does success look like in 2036? And we would love to hear you.
Thank you so much, Preeti, and thank you. Disha also I have to mention because she's been after me for a long time. And thank you, Kritisha, for really giving a beautiful, oversight of what is happening all across. Coming back to the Orissa Vision document, when you really look at it, the emphasis is there on urbanization. And of course, they are looking at various institutions which are within the broader prospect. And the first step, if you really look at, they've declared Puri as a corporation, municipal corporation, and bringing in more and more peri-urban areas, as we would say, into the fold to initiate and execute the process. Uh, while looking at all these, and also when you look at if you look at the SDGs, you can't look at SDG 11 in isolation, because all the SDGs have something or the other within that small urban space. And even if the urban spaces don't look into, let's say, poverty reduction, we have slums, you will have health issues, you will have sanitation issues, you will have climate change issues. So somewhere we need to bring that together, and I think that's one area where the government is still navigating. They are only navigating the siloed developments, slum development in one way, or improving the urban mobility. So that cohesiveness, that convergence is something which is missing. And the planning aspects, when we talk about the urban planning aspects also, somewhere, I don't know, for whatever reason, uh, the master plans are developed, but the master plans also get fonted in such a way that in spaces where you had water bodies, you see a construction the other day. And how do you take care of it? So I think there is a lot more to do in strengthening the governance systems, including people's participation, people's feedback. And if once that governance system is strengthened, I think many of the other problems can be overcome. So I'll stop here and I'll come back again if I require, specifically from the other point of view, looking at how the without the risk reduction or the climate change aspects being taken in, the whole urbanization itself is in a big dilemma. And I'm sure Kirti Shahji would be able to give us very good examples from Ahmedabad city or Mumbai cities which went under water, or the earthquakes for that matter.
Yeah, thank you, Abhaji. Trying to build on some of your reflections around urban planning and the governance model, I would just quickly try to bring in Professor Tathagata Chatterji. He's a veteran for all of INHAF's webinar. And one prodding question that I have for you as an introduction: if SDGs define what we want to achieve, then planning determines how do we do it. Then how can Odisha actually move beyond land use planning towards a governance framework that integrates climate resilience, economic growth, and social inclusion? And I think a lot of your spotlighting has been around Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. So, Professor Tathagata Chatterji, would like to hear you.
Thank you, Preeti ji, and thank you, Kirti bhai, for having me here again. Um, what I see that Odisha's urban vision 2036, it's a very ambitious mission, and it has got a aspirational target of reaching urbanization level to about 40%. So we don't have the current census data, but as per 2011 census, it was about 17%. So 17% to 40% from 2011 to 2036. So in 25 years' time, that's really a very tall target. It is not unachievable, but what I feel is that how that target is going to be achieved. Although I very much appreciate that Odisha has come up with a broad urban vision, and which is in tune with the need, because without a broad urban vision, it is impossible to achieve larger development goals of Vikshit Odisha or Vikshit Bharat. Uh, but the question is, the devil is in the detail. Um, I would like to structure my thinking around three F's: funds, functions, and functionaries, and try to dissect that whether we have the right ingredients to reach the goal. Because achieving urbanization as a target, um, is it going to really fulfill the quality of life or increase the economic growth? I think we need to go beyond the normative target and see how urbanization actually contributes, and what would be the governance mechanism to bring the level of development in tune with the 40% vision. So first, it comes in the funds. Uh, we call the cities as the economic growth engines, but most of the cities are fund-starved. Now, if we look at Odisha in particular, so the Bhubaneswar is, of course, the most financially better off city within the state. But even Bhubaneswar is unable to fund more than 50% of its development budget through its own capital, own revenue. So for the rest 50%, it is dependent on transfers from the state and the central government. So in terms of, but when we talk about the larger development goals, how, to what extent you can achieve that goal with, when you do not have your own funding resources. So the second question here, it is coming about the decision making. So we all know about the 74th Amendment and the 18 functions that were supposed to be devolved. In Odisha, many of the functions has actually been devolved in paper. But as in case of many other cities, states in India, there are overlapping responsibilities. So even though the cities has the function devolved in paper, but in real life, they do not have the say. Say, for example, again, when it comes to raising of the funds, so the major source of funds, one big source which I think should be devolved to the states. It is about property registration fees. Property tax happens to be the largest source of revenue for the cities, but sales tax, property registration tax, that goes to the state governments. And that's constitutes a very big component. And also, do the cities have the power to raise their own taxes? So that power is also not with the city government, it is with the state governments. So even though if you go by the ticking the box, the cities have been given many of the functions, but there are strings attached. So at the end of the day, it is the state government which runs the cities. The third question and that is a point I would take off from where Preeti also mentioned, that is about the functionaries, that is about the human resource capital required. Do we have the capacities in the cities to manage urbanization? It is not just about planning, but all other kinds of all other types of functions that you need to have. So the last data that I saw, that again, there are huge vacancies in the urban local bodies. So I think about 30 to 40% positions are lying vacant. Um, and even, if we talk about planning, because we come from the planning background, and to us, that's kind of the most important function and for a city to have. But here again, the question is, does Odisha have the number of urban planners? It has got very few number of urban planners at the state system. There are other planners in the consultants, but depending on consultants, it is difficult to have a long-term vision for the city because the consultants come and go, and they work for a specific period as long as only the funds are there. So for the cities to have a longer vision, to incorporate, they needs to stand on their own, and they needs to have their internal capacity, both in terms of uh, financing, administrative devolution, and having the human resource and the technical capacities to deliver on that front. So until and unless we think about these three Fs, funds, functions, and functionaries, the larger vision that we have would remain a vision, and translating that into real life will become a problem. Now, here there is another catch that I would like to mention, that we should not fall for the target, normative target. It seems that, in some other states, I would not like to name it right now, some other states is also, trying to push up its urbanization level. And in many cases, what is happening is that peri-urban areas and the small towns are being upgraded to municipal levels. But upgrading on paper is one thing, but are they being provided for? Are they being has shift from being a gram panchayat to being a notified area committee, as it's in Odisha, or let's say a municipality or a municipal corporation? Has it really made a tangible difference into the urban services? So the broader goal of, aligning with SDGs would come there, because SDGs again has got a number of targets, and SDG 11 itself has got 10 targets, which are linked to improving in the components, from achieving housing goals to achieving mobility to achieving water and waste. So on some of the targets, like defecation free cities, or having Pakka housing delivered, so there had been progress. There had been a lot of progress, but how is that progress um, being monitored? And again, there is a question of data. So there is a huge data gap when it comes to monitoring the SDG targets. Again, this is not the problem just with Odisha, but with many developing countries as well, because many of the urban data that the SDG calls for were never measured before. So there is no framework to measure those data. So those are some of the bigger questions that we need to address.
Yeah.
But I'm very positive about the Bhubaneswar, Puri, Paradip, Cuttack, that metropolitan region planning. I think, that's really a very need of the hour. With this, I will stop for now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for kind of putting it within the framework. And I think Odisha technically is a little different because it has close to 100 plus tier 2, tier 3 cities, which, like you clearly said, that a lot of them have been upgraded. Like even Government of India is looking at newer classification right now. It's about statutory towns, new urban settlements, and we are stretching ourselves when it comes to definition of what is urban. Largely, it is population and also the stretching of the geographical boundaries. So glad that you were able to kind of pull together, but something that I can infer from your conversation, it's not a problem very, very focused on Odisha. It's stretching across all the 4,000, 5,000 plus cities that we have in India. And all of these trajectories of challenges is what we are going to confront in the next decade or so. So thank you so much on this. And I'll come back to you with further questions. But
Sure.
moving ahead, I think I will bring in our third speaker for today. And like we said, that cities don't grow because buildings are made or there is an infrastructure. They grow because people move. They start working, they start creating, they start building and contributing. For decades, this has been the case. And one person that has been somehow very significant in that has been Daniel G, who has continued to work at the intersection of migration, livelihood, humanitarian responses, and human development in Odisha and beyond across Southeast Asia. His work reminds us that mobility is not merely a demographic trend. It is a powerful driver for economic and social transformation as well. Currently, as I hear, he's also writing a book called Dadan, which brings together some of his experiences. And so one of the questions that I had for Daniel G, and let me also kind of bring him into the conversation, is that urban growth is fundamentally about people. Migration is often seen as the big red challenge in it. But rather than seeing it as a challenge, how can Odisha actually recognize some of its youth, its migrant population as drivers of economic transformation? Today, when we are in a part of history where we are more urban than any time in history, how can we treat migration as an opportunity is something that I would like to hear Daniel G talk about.
Thank you, Preeti. It's wonderful to be here. Kirti Saab and my fellow panelists. I can't imagine a city without migrants. Migrants are the engines of growth. And we always see that. And when you say the numbers matters, 2011 census says around 77% of people in Bhubaneswar are the migrants. It's a 77%. That means they don't belong to here, but they came and they built the city. Or they are the people who are actually working. And I was wondering, because Odisha, we don't discuss or more about migration in cities and urban area, but we are more concerned about the migration which is happening. People are moving out to different places. So always we discuss about both the distress, the aspiration kind of debate is always. But when we discuss about the urbanization and urban area, and you were saying like the data, like the goal is there, the current 17% to 60% the government want to move the urbanization. Look, urbanization is, as you said rightly, Preeti, urbanization is ultimately about people moving, working, innovating, contributing to economic growth, but they're invisible. That is exactly precisely happened in most of the cities. And I think the time has come. And I was going through the urban kind of vision document. Not a single place I read or written migrants in the Odisha vision document. I was actually looking, I was searching, is there any migrant? But migrants are actually mostly dealt in the rural development context, those who are actually moving out. But when the city, the discourse is coming, so we have not discussed anywhere. Basically, like 2036, I think we have an opportunity here. How we can shift the narrative from viewing migration as a problem to recognizing migrants and youth as a key drivers of urban transformation. I think that is what we need to see. And migrants and youth are not byproduct of urbanization. Yeah, that always we have seen. There is primary drivers. So if you see that migrants are the primary drivers, and Odisha cities are growing because people move in search of education, employment, business, opportunity, and better quality of life. So we have different hierarchy of migrants who are coming from informal labor to students to many. So it's a time that how we could have an inclusive kind of planning process. And think about a situation where we all have done this, Preeti, like the participatory planning, where people could come and also like we can allow people to speak about their issues, including children in the slums and other places. But this is one area I'm thinking, like, you made a vision document, it's fine. I think whose vision is that actually? Sometimes I think that it's a state vision or consultants have drawn it, and what are the processes were actually done. So when you're talking about a very complex kind of urban area, and um, uh, Kirtiji has very well put it, like it no doubt is a urban governance is a very complex process. Uh, but how you see cities like Bhubaneswar, which is also a smart city, to also come up with inculcate some of the uh, uh, philosophy or some of the values for bringing people's voices into that, people's aspiration. And many migrants, they come with their own aspiration in a city. Um, you know, at the same time, urban governance systems should provide opportunity for migrant and young people to participate in decision-making process, which I've said. Then the community institutions which are built up, local economic planning. All this, I think, is a key pillar that how we will do. But let me tell you, we don't have the footfall of migrant in any city today. We have not developed that mechanism. What is the footfall of migrant coming to the cities? We don't have a database. I think we discussed about Kirtiji, we discussed about post-COVID situation. Like the government should have data. Government should have a data about migrants, in migrant, out migrant. But in Bhubaneswar city, no one would actually tell how many migrants. Yeah, census, we wait for census. But there should be some data available where how many migrant in slum, in non-slum area, um, how many of them are there, how many children are there, how many families are there. So the database is important for any planning. I think the vision document is incomplete if you don't have actually a data about migrants also if you are planning something. I would say Odisha's urban vision must recognize that migrant and youth are not burden on the cities. So sometimes we feel these people are burdened, they are actually uninvited or unwanted guests for coming to our city. They will take away all the basic facilities. And this reminds me, I think I need to study this, and Kirtiji can tell me. In Surat, we have around 6 lakh migrants from Odisha working there in Surat, in urban area. So we need to see how this inclusion has been done there, or how the municipalities are managing such a huge influx of people there. And because our cities are not growing that much, I know, but significant migrant workers are coming. So they are not burdened. They are the builders, workers, entrepreneur, innovator who make cities grow. The future Odisha's urban economy will depend on how effectively it invests in and empowers its human capital. I would say that because we need to make them visible, we need to have database, we need to create a participatory kind of mechanism for their views, their vision, and we need to invest and create those skilling which are required for the future cities, the kind of work we need. Yeah, I'll stop there, Preeti. Yeah, thank you.
No, this exciting. While you speak, Daniel ji, I was kind of also pushing that sometimes each one of us, like you rightfully said, is a migrant. And because it's a fundamental right, we take it for granted. But when we start thinking about migration, our immediate visualization comes to the lower economic segment of society. And we think that migration is limited to that understanding of it. Just because we can afford to migrate, suddenly our narrative around being a migrant changes. So that is an exciting, and I'll come back to you on that. I'll just try to also like something that you very clearly said about participatory approaches to urban development. And a lot of us have been working in that space. I think that also helps me bring Sneha ji into the conversation because, first of all, I would like to thank her for being part of this conversation. And Sneha ji has been somebody who has spent years working with youth, with migrants, with people, with and children especially in cities of Orissa, trying to demonstrate what participatory processes look like. And she's been very passively driving some of that. So one of my questions that I wanted to ask her was how can Orissa actually institutionalize community ownership so that citizens can become co-creators of urban development rather than beneficiary in this process. What has been also very difficult to say that, like you rightfully said, Daniel ji, that there is not a single migrant mentioned in the vision document. There is also, I mean, the people-centric and people development is like one of the big petals of it. And so while they have centered people in that imagination, how to engage with the people to derive that vision document? The first question you asked was, whose vision document is it? Is it the states? Is it the people? And those are some of the questions I think I will try to understand from Sneha ji's work and her conversation. And she's done tremendous work with adolescents in Odisha.
Well, thank you, Preeti. Thank you for having me. And in fact, the moment Disha actually spoke to me about this particular webinar, I thought this is somewhere we have been also investing for many years now. And probably, I could speak, even though there was no preparation from my side, but I thought I can actually speak from whatever we are doing. Talking about the vision document of Odisha, as Daniel has very rightly put, whose vision document is it? Has it been really evolved by the participation of the urbanites, let us say, or it is just a document that has been imposed by the government? uh, Even then, even if Dr. Chatterji was talking about, there is no resources, or we need to have those resources to visualize, to kind of make the vision to a reality. Now let us say that we have the resources, we have the urban planners in place, everything is there, but then where is the space for participation for of the urbanites in different sectionalities for that matter? I mean, if you look into the vision document, it speaks about 60% urbanization. It also speaks about 100% saturation of access to community space. Now, here comes actually our small piece of work that we have been doing here in with the BMC for last 3.5 years, where we are kind of promoting the participation of adolescents in the city planning, let us say. Because if you're talking about a city, then the city has to be accessible by the adolescents, or for that matter, every category of people. But often we actually forget our children. I mean, we often forget that the children do have a right to participate in the planning, because everything that is concerning to their rights, they have a say. That is how the UNCRC is talking about, and India also has ratified UNCRC. But somehow, when we think about creating those spaces, we are probably forgetting they could be the co-creator, as you rightly said. So what we've done actually across these 3.5 years is we had a lot of consultation with the adolescents people, and then we kind of say that this is a public space. So identifying the public space, it's just not a park or something, but it could be mainly even the pavements. That is also public space. Now, how do the children actually have access to that? And do they feel it is safe? Do they feel it is a vibrant space where they can put up their own, whatever they wanted to do? It could be a small game, it could be a storytelling session. How do they actually wanted to use those spaces? So there's a lot of exercise that has been done, and the adolescents actually came up with a number of things that they listed out. And the other thing which I also would like to say over here is, we just do not work with the adolescent people, but we have a very core competency of working with children with disabilities, and that is how voices of adolescents with disability were also kind of given a space, given a due space over there. So my colleagues have actually kind of worked hard in terms of getting the adolescents with disabilities, not only by getting just to give their opinion about the space, but also trying to make the tools accessible for them, so that they can audit that particular space. So children have audited the space. Not only that, they also had a discussion with the city officials how the space can be audited, so that it can be accessed by the adolescents. Because considering the kind of unsafe, I mean, quote unquote, things that is actually, going quite heavy across the cities, how children can be, felt safe. And they had a lot of opinion about that. And so sharing those opinions with the city officials, what we find out is the city officials are also open to our ideas. Now, here I would like to bring in, Dr. Chatterji's thing that do we have that kind of resources? Well, the city officials have never told us that whether they have those kind of resources or not. For some or other now, they have rather started asking us if you could think about demonstrating a thing. So I remember back in 1.5 years we have demonstrated a public space, a road which is connecting, to the major to the main road that is there in Bhubaneswar, to kind of declare that road as an inclusive and a safe space for adolescents. So we demonstrated that thing also over there. So how a public space can be, like built in, even the pavement. So how the pavement can be accessible for children with disability, along with other children, other adolescents. So I hope we have been able to like demonstrate that properly. So keeping that in view, right now we are actually working with the BMC in terms of making some of the toilets in the cities accessible for not only people with disabilities but also for women who have been actually kind of menstruating, and if they would like to use these toilets for this purpose. So menstruation friendly and of course accessible toilets, those have been actually kind of our work right now with the BMC. So what I'm trying to say over here is the space that we are providing to the adolescents, or even let us say to a very specific group of adolescents. It could be girls, it could be people with disabilities, or children with disability. So do we have that kind of lens? Do we have that kind of acceptance to the children? So if that is there, then what we should be doing is creating, the citizens in a space where the voice of children can be also kind of, recorded, and in terms of city planning, in terms of making things which are not only accessible, but it has to be safe for the adolescents. So that's what we've been doing right now. So maybe, I can take up other questions later. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sneha ji. I think while you were speaking, I just remembered that Bhubaneswar was also one of the first city that has kind of positioned itself to be India's first child-friendly city in its vision for the smart cities. And 2 years ago, they launched the guidelines towards it by categorization of public spaces and giving them ranking benchmarking around how differently it could be done. So thank you for bringing that lens and towards the openness of the government, especially Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, and larger ULBs in Odisha, and their openness towards more ideas. In terms of capacities, I think there is, of course, I would kind of also align to Professor Chatterji's kind of reflection here that we seemingly lack it. But in terms of being open to ideas and experimenting it, trying to build it, there has been a very focused kind of experience that we have all seen through our work in Odisha. So I will come back to you with more questions, but this also kind of brings us to the second leg of our session in terms where we'll try discussing that how are we building resilient and future ready cities. And in this transition and context setting, I would like to also say that you can't talk about Odisha without talking about disasters. It's like you have to actually speak in the same breath. For the 100 years that we have seen Odisha, at least for close to 99 years, we have seen disasters. And one of this defining problem has become one of our identity globally. And today, Odisha is recognized as one of the leaders in disaster risk management. So while I was trying to look into it, I would also try to bring in Abha ji into it, because I also see that her work around climate has been a marker through UNDP's support. And so the climate resilience that we are talking about today is no longer an environmental issue alone. How can Odisha actually integrate resilience into housing, livelihood, financing, public service delivery? How do you kind of interplay climate in the best possible way? I think Odisha is one of the most climate aware state, where every other person, you go to a panchayat, you go to the slums, people speak the language of how they're experiencing climate change. And Sneha, I also know that you work a lot on heat. So I'll come back to you on that, but I would love to hear Abhaji's kind of experience around some of this work on disaster risk management.
Thanks, Preeti. The question about, I'll go back to my initial remark saying that our planning needs to be first disaster resilient or climate smart.
Okay.
And that's where I think most of the cities in India and even in Odisha, we are failing. So when the planning is done, one of the biggest challenge for Bhubaneswar city per se has been the flooding, which is happening. And everybody says because many of the things have been built on the small streams which were flowing and other things. So we don't know how far we as practitioners, we may not understand the planning concept which went around it. It's the urban planners and others who are responsible for them. So the first, even when you look at, somebody was yesterday only mentioning that while we are aware that 270 kilometers per hour wind speeds to more than that 300 kilometers per hour, we get it, but we are still going for glass facades. And when you look at the heat, heat within the city of Bhubaneswar, our trees are not as the plantation of trees which are happening is not as per the local environment. We are bringing in exotic species. So first and foremost is that while we recognize the climate resilience, are we incorporating the aspects which is required within our planning? And the second bit would be, which I absolutely agree with Tathagata ji, is about the funds and the functionaries. And the functionaries, do they understand what are the functions they need to do and how it has to be done? The garbage is collected and put on the roadside without it being cleaned up very fast. And then you have rains, the monsoons has hit Orissa. So you have rains and it goes back again. And then you have water clogging. So, these are the things. So we don't have, so while we have holding tax in Orissa, the holding taxes goes to the municipalities, the NSEs and everywhere, but it is not as sufficient. We have OSDM, Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, which give funds, but that would be post disaster, not before disaster. So, and then when we look at it from the angle of what Sneha talked about, adolescent girls, differentially abled persons, or person with disability, or we look at the migrants, we get the whole gamut of vulnerable people together. And what are the specific action points we have done for that? It's not enough. The planning is not strong enough. Along with that planning, our infrastructure is also not being properly regulated. Somewhere we are missing the links. We, we are not looking at what is the capacity of that particular area for, let's say a simple thing as water. And we have big apartments coming in there, and we have big boards. Puri city was declared as drink from trap city, but many places within the city, if you go and talk to people, they say no, we still don't drink that water. We have a tube well, we will drink it from there because that's sweeter than what is being given to us. There's a taste difference between it. So somewhere we need to think about our water bodies. We need to have better drainage networks, safer housing location, and also preservation of the hazard zone areas, prone zone areas, with emergency support system, which needs to be a stronger emergency. Along with that, Orissa is also, getting into a space where our birth rates are going down, our death rates are increasing, and we may have more elderly population within the city also. Are we looking at this particular population? What type of care mechanisms are we giving for the children and for the elderly? So that is also, that's a very, very important thing, because within the urban system, if we do not take care of our wetlands, natural drainage systems, or floodplains, or we reduce the grains, we are creating new risks. Because as you rightly mentioned, Preeti, we are a state which is very, very vulnerable to climate change. We have floods, cyclones, heat waves. I don't know. one day we may also have some cold waves. Precipitation is too high. So we have these things, and we need to look at these more and more risks, and also look at the informal settlements. We may try as much as possible to improve our informal settlements, unless we have a very, very well defined regulatory system saying, yeah, you cannot open a shop here, you cannot settle down here, and there are immediately within few days those are removed. We will always have informal settlements, and newer informal settlements will come in. So maybe within cities also, I think it is important we look at it from an eco-based restoration mechanisms. Look at cities, and that could go into our planning mechanism. We can have, the city can have the management plan or plan for the city for 20 years, but then it has to be broken up into a smaller bit and pieces to improve it. The California city was not rebuilt in 5 years after the earthquake. It has taken 20 or 30 years to rebuild this city, to improve upon, and I'm sure many other Japan cities and others would have the same problem. So I think there are many things which we can do. If we have a second round, third round, I'll talk about some of the recommendations which could be given for this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that place-based approach that you're talking about at a bioregions or an eco-region kind of narrative is something that we have not kind of anchored on that and kind of not inbuilt into the planet mechanism altogether. So like, I think the first point you made when you came in was about the master plans. And every time that there is this consensus across India that they are redundant, they are not doing justice to how planning should see, because of the flexibility, adaptability, and looking at cities as a living organism. It's like growing. It's growing every day, and there's so much of newness. While some of the cities are growing, some of the cities are also declining. So you can't be predicting for the next 20, 30 years and saying that the master plans are like the go-to documents. And I thank you for bringing in a lot of nuances in terms of the green and blue infrastructures, in terms of what is actually happening to our wetlands. We are not seriously asking some of these questions. And with this reflection, I will actually kind of bring in Professor Chatterji, because his aspects around the 3 Fs and the small and medium towns, I think those are the spaces which require a lot of work and a lot of energies for us to come together, because we can't measure Odisha by the top 5, 6 cities and say that we are urbanized, and that are instrumental in driving some of this vision for urbanization. So, Professor Chatterjee, one of the questions that I had for you is that how can Odisha actually help this emerging concept to actually come up? And how can it be more climate resilience in terms of intersectionality with key components, housing, let's say roadways, in terms of our energy requirement, all of this, and how can we better plan from the beginning?
Very pertinent questions, Preeti ji, and also some very important issues raised by Mr. Daniel, Abha ma'am, Sneha ma'am. So all of this has got a lot of
I think we lost him.
We
Yeah.
lost him.
Yeah.
That's probably some connectivity issue.
Yeah. Then I think we can pause for Tathagata to come. And Sneha, I also wanted to hear a bit about the inclusive neighborhoods. I think while we are saying that it's place-based, it has to operate within a certain neighborhood, there has to be inclusivity. And another aspect, that when we talk about vulnerability, Odisha has also done quite a bit of work around transgender communities. So you see that work in cities, you see them as part of the city's functioning, you see them working in BMC, CMC, and all of that. So how do we kind of bring in that lens of building more inclusive neighborhoods? And some of this work were explored with Jaga Mission. Of course, that's like a landmark mission that has been guiding principles for many other cities across globally as well. And so I would want to hear, because you kind of brought in the aspect of informality also as one of the layers.
Yeah, I think you said it very rightly. I mean, when we talk about the Jaga mission specifically, like Abha was just talking about the infrastructure problem that we are actually having. So it's just not talking about it, but then also creating the infrastructures accessible for people of different intersectionality, be it like transgenders, be it the women, be it people with disabilities, or even any other vulnerable category for that matter. I think the first of all is like the kind of acceptance that we should have for those kind of people. So considering or accepting the vulnerability that they are going through, and based on that vulnerability, if we could like bring in, if you could think of creating a space where they can voice it out, and also the designers make a design which would be accessible. For example, if I talk about Jaga Mission, I mean, I have a very interesting experience also. Like one of our a child with disability, so they were there in the slums, and then very recently they have actually got evicted from that place, and they were given a place over there. Right now, this space is actually in the second floor. Now, she is a child with locomotor disability, and she's almost 15-year-old now, and absolutely depending on her parents because she's a quadriplegic child. So how difficult it must be for the parents to lift her up, because there's no lift definitely over there. So getting that child to the second floor, and then again coming down with the child for anything that they want to. For example, when we talk about even accessing the public space, just because a person is like wheelchair bound doesn't mean that she doesn't have a right to access the public space. Even for that also, the person has to come down all those stairs, and has to be dependent on the parents, because hardly these people actually have any other caretakers. So considering that, which is very, very important, and you raise about the transgender people, I also would like to tell you that first of all, these people do not have that kind of acceptance in even in the neighboring like community. There are many incidents where even if they are there in the slums, let us say, they have not been accepted by the neighboring people, and then sometimes there's a lot of issue that happens. But then, having said that, because they are the people that are also there, so we also have to think about accepting these people in those public space, not only by giving an access to them, but also a dignified access to those people. I mean, we are constructing the toilets, but have we ever thought about the trans persons? We always have a male toilet and female toilet. We cannot think about having a toilet specifically for trans people. If they go to the male toilet, then the male do not accept it. If they go to the female toilet, then the female do not accept it. So thinking from that lens is very, very important. And I think once we start recording those voices, once we start actually giving space to those voices, then the city planning can be more comprehensive, can be more like accessible, and accessible to all the people for that matter. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to say. The other thing I just wanted to flag up here, Preeti, is as for the 2036 vision document, Odisha government is going to develop at least 8 to 9 cities. I mean, including some of the district headquarters, and they are actually getting it into a very urbanized space. Now, if the planning and then all the kind of trying to record the voices of those vulnerable people not happening from the very beginning, there is every chance that we miss out the same thing, and then we are going to reinvent the wheels again and again. We talk about transportation, and the Odisha government is saying 100% transportation which is accessible. Now, if you have people, those are actually wheelchair accesses, people, those are elderly people. So do we have real access for them? And then anything, which has been kind of, marked for the elderly people, or marked for the people with disabilities within that, infrastructures, within that city commuting buses or something like that, is also something which is very, very important. So those things has to be actually considered from the very beginning itself when we are thinking about co-creating, these cities. So voices of people matters, and matters a lot. And in fact, I would agree with Daniel over here that people those have been making these cities, I mean the laborers. So someone or other now we have been sidelining them, we have been kind of like marginalizing them, and their voices have never been kind of heard about here. So somehow the concern is getting the marginalized into the central of our thoughts and seeing that they get a due space over there in our cities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sneha. And Tathagata, if you're back, we would like to hear the question that I was trying to actually.
Yeah. I got your question. Sorry, I got disconnected. Now, coming to the issues. So again, I think we need to look at some of the bigger institutional connections to address these questions. But let me first, address one or two points raised by Mr. Daniel and Abha ma'am. Mr. Daniel talked about migrants. Of course, we have to recognize the migrants as the energy of the city. And a city that does not attract migrants, we need to consider, that city is not growing. Unless there are migrants with the city, when a city stops attracting migrants, means that that city has lost its economic dynamism. And second, the point raised by Asha ma'am, it's about, she talked about the environmental challenges, the wetlands. And here, we need to think that, that urban vision document does not practically talk about the environmental issues, the climate change issues at all. And Odisha is facing some of the most severe climate challenges. It is not the flood. When we talk about disaster, we think about cyclones. But Odisha is also facing a lot of heat island effect. And the cities are the extremely hot. And again, when it comes to the heat island effect, the impact of that are unevenly distributed. It is the poorer sections which has to bear most of the problems, because they are the ones who are working as street vendors or construction workers, or auto drivers. Most of the time, they are the outdoor workers in most cases. So those are some of the major nuances are not being addressed in the vision document. And also this brings me to the point raised by Sneha ma'am about the adolescence. And Preeti ji, you also talked about Odisha being, or rather Bhubaneswar being at the forefront of calling itself as a child-friendly city. Yeah, that was child-friendly city was one of the core themes of the Bhubaneswar Smart City Plan. But here again, this brings us to the question of who is doing the planning. And is it the consultants who are defining the vision, or that vision has got ingrained embedded within the institutions which are running the system? So if the system is brought in by the consultants, so then it remains a slogan, and it is a larger policy goal as a statement made in, but not incorporated into the regular day-to-day planning framework, into the local action plan or the local budgets. And so when that plan goes, and so there is no carryover of that plan. So there is no institutional memory left about incorporating those ideas into the next cycle, next budget cycle, next financing cycle. So this again, I then go back to the fundamental points I talked about, the funds, functions, and the functionaries. So here, how we are doing our planning. Is the planning or the cities we are imagining, planning, managing, governing, whatever we call it, are we doing it as a top-down exercise, or the forces are there from the bottom up? Had it been the forces of bottom up, then many of the issues that we talk about the adolescence, or about the environmental challenges, or that of the migrants, I think would have been a longer run in the policy cycle. But when it is top down, it then the to what extent that the item remains on the agenda, it's linked to it becomes co-terminus with that of the champion. When that particular champion, that particular secretary, that particular minister is there, that the item remains on the table. And after that, there is a change of personnel, then it falls off the agenda. So it is not gets institutionalized.
Yeah.
So I think I have answered some of your points.
No, absolutely right. I think all it draws me back is to the systemic fundamentals. Those are missing in some of these spaces, and it is so iterative that across cities the same pattern kind of exists. Till we kind of start fixing some of these systemic bottlenecks, our cities won't be as beautiful, or our aspiration towards designing more urban and future prepared cities won't be a reality. And a great way of framing that and bringing us back to some of this thinking. And the harping around people brings me to a question that I would like to kind of bring in Daniel Ji here and talk about the future of work. Uh, the demographics of Odisha is shifting. And he's seen that with a lot of his work with interstate and intrastate migration. And we are seeing there is a demographic dividend, which we are so proud of. And at the same time, there are also climate change, automation, green transition, and some digital technologies that are rapidly pushing from the kind of nature of work that we can potentially look at. When we say future ready, we need to really also kind of deep dive into some of this kind of understanding and see that what is the challenge of creating more job? Is it the challenge of creating more job, or is it preparing young people, or let's say migrants, with the right sense of skills and competencies and the opportunities? While the aspiration is also to kind of have a 11 to 12% incremental growth across sector, from manufacturing to tertiary industries in service related. While some of these areas are also being like Abhaji was talking about waste and water. These are all ancillary kind of spaces in which also a set of livelihoods are emerging, but they are not kind of labeled in that sense. So, Daniel ji, what I would like to also understand from a lot of your work is that as climate change and technology will start reshaping labor markets, what investments are needed today to prepare cities in Orissa to kind of best utilize their competencies and kind of position it for tomorrow's economy?
Yeah, I think climate change is reshaping many things and also the jobs. And we are in a process of El Nino kind of condition, which is like already showing its result, like the 46% less rain that we have got for Odisha, and it will grow up. I think the rainfall would be lesser. So you know the catastrophe, you know the impact which is going to happen on the water and the employment, and rural migration will increase. Rural migration will increase because of drought and slow onset disaster, which we are going to see that. Few years back, I think we all have influenced the government of Odisha to come up with a MG and REJ kind of urban jobs here. Because we know the kind of skills which people are coming here. You go around the city, any city you go around, bigger city, people will be standing in the labor addas, and you could know what kind of skills they have. That is the lowest skills people have. Masonry, the people are actually with so that people, they think only the construction kind of jobs are available in Bhubaneswar, So large number of people are coming. And as per 2011 census, 91% internal migrants and only 7% are coming from other states. That means you see that the kind of jobs are required. And in Odisha, we are the one who are having the lowest level of skilling. In a tribal area, in a remote area, in the last mile area. So people, and many people, they prefer to go to Kerala rather than they come to Bhubaneswar. As Professor Chatterji was saying, it's not attracting migrants. The kind of job is required. So basically, like when you see the traditional jobs are changing now, and the precarious employment which actually we are in, mostly are people, and they are at the crossroad. People are actually losing jobs, and the kind of emergency that is happening today. We know that Kendrapada, there is a bus going directly to Kerala taking people, but they don't come to Bhubaneswar because they know the jobs are not available. They know the wages are lesser. They know they don't have the basic facilities here. Again, coming back, I think in government of Odisha in the past has actually came up with some proposal to come up with a rental housing for the migrants with the 300 crores. Suddenly that plan was nowhere. I think we have consulted, what is this plan? Why don't you do this? Like Kerala is doing Apna Ghar to attract migrant young people to come in a dormitory and all. And here we don't have that. Where they will come, I think it's expensive. Many rural area or tribal area people to come to Bhubaneswar, come here and work. And it's very expensive to find out a house or so. It's not only jobs, Preeti, it's basically to create an environment, an ecosystem where migrant could come and they could actually work. That is one issue. I think the future of work are mostly like, you can say renewable energy, you can digital services, green industry, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, all you can say, these are all. But my fear is that the people on the bottom will lose out all these things because we don't recognize the RPL, recognizing prior learning. We don't reskill people. And that is what the problem is. You look at, we should learn from Andhra Pradesh what they did. Andhra Pradesh has done a mapping of all its young people, their skill level, their aspiration, everything. Now they have a digitally available data. What kind of future ready kind of job they are going to do. And it's well mapped out, I tell you. And we, as I said, migrants are faceless, they're invisible. So many times then you see that they come with their own skilling here. They can come with there, but there is no any institute today that whoever are coming, how they could be reskilled. Again, the vocational training, vocational level kind of skilling which are there existing need to improve. I think this all can be done at the rural area from where people are coming. We need to invest more there, create that kind of skilling. And here I know very difficult. The feeder district from where migrants are coming, the source district need to have better kind of skill and other kind of processes. The construction industry or waste management, water conservation, climate resilient agriculture, these are all the area, but I see that things are not moving. We are having a traditional 3 months training program on certain kind of trade. And that's all. So we need to diversify our training and skilling for young people, do mapping across our villages, wherever people want to come, and provide the basic social protection, housing, then you have wages and all. That will attract more migrants. People would come. And Odisha is situated among the states, you can see, many of these states are backward. You talk about Jharkhand, you talk about Bihar, Chhattisgarh, except Andhra Pradesh. But still, the movement, the corridors are not developing within the Odisha. The corridors are all out migration. Some friend has actually written, thank you very much for bringing out this issue in a chat. He said, look, migrants in Surat are facing today about the LPG problem, and many of them are going back to their villages. I know this is what is going to happen to the migrant. If you are not providing them the basic services, basic kind of facilities, I think they will not be able to do. So finally, I would say skilling is definitely required, and skilling certification and I think you need to create that ecosystem, create that a condition where people can come. It's on a housing, it's a basic services, basic entitlement. I will tell you one nation, one ration. I was going across to see that whether people are accessing this PDS system and all. Then I surprised to see there is a condition that they have to bring their PDS card to here. अरे पीडीएस कार्ड तो वो अपने माँ बाप के पास रखेंगे ना गांव में, वो पीडीएस कार्ड आपको क्यों चाहिए? They are migrant. You need to take their identity, whatever identity you have, and you provide the PDS, the food security. So मुझे लग रहा, I think we need to come up with certain policy. We need to review our policies because mobility and basic services, portability, that I worked in a lot of areas, it's still an area of concern. So I would see that lot more need to be done in this area for an inclusive kind of policy for the migrant worker. Yeah. Thank you.
Danielji, just because before you, there's a lot of work you had done around the portability of social protection, whether it was education, health, or nutrition facilities, and especially with children around bricklands. And that has been an experience across some of the states in India. And has there been a reflection in terms of policy? Because when we talk about, like you talk about the PDS card, it is a fundamental document that people are expected to have, but they can't have. Right. So there are seemingly challenges with that. Do you think the next course of solving for some of our problem also lies in developing mechanisms such as the portability of services?
Yes, I think that is what will attract people. I think it would be a very positive, it will create a positive sense that a pro-migration policy requires all this. Like how you would have, women will access your Anganwadi services, your PDS services, worker will have a craze inside the work site. Children, despite of their background, they can come and access education because migrant would see. Look, many of these bricklin that we worked also, children from Bihar have also came here and we try to connect them with the education system. So that's other issues, it take longer time. But yes, portability still remains as a big issue. And how that will be done, inter-district, so that is one issue. And today, it's not only that, elections after elections, we are thinking that migrants are losing out their voting rights. They can't come, allow them to vote wherever they are for the leaders they think. That is also should be portable. Your basic citizenship rights you're talking about, basic those things need to be also addressed, and a pro policy is required for the migrant because they are going to create your city to a livable kind of place and will provide all. Today, most of the migrants, they don't have the social protections. Those who are selling the hawkers who are selling the vegetable on the pavements, or the gig worker and other, they're still struggling. And it's basically you need to create that environment where they will have a better life also. And also identify spaces where their housing could be also be taken. Housing is a bigger issue, I tell you. Bigger issue. That's the foremost issue that need to be addressed. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for it. With this, I also kind of bring in Professor Chatterji into the conversation because while he talked a lot about financing, and this has come up in some of the questions that we have, one thing that some of the audience have also called out has been on the Urban Challenge Fund. So while we see that the deficiency of fund, lack of fund in the urban local bodies is going to be one of the major challenges, but people think that with the government recognizing the Urban Challenge Fund as one of the drivers is instrumental. So I would like to hear your thoughts, Professor Chatterjee, around it. Is he there? Okay. I don't see him online, so probably I'll try to move on to Abhaji here. Like some of the fundamental of saying that we shouldn't leave anyone behind while we are doing some of our development processes. What I would like to hear is how does Odisha, after like 3 decades of work that you have done, how do you think Odisha can institutionalize some of this into more governance framework to say that?
That's a very, very difficult question, specifically when there's a lot of work which is going on in silos. Like I mentioned in the initial ways, somewhere we need to converge, and cities can have that converging, framework in itself. We do not have that as of now, because the housing board does its own work, create houses, but how does it translate to what Daniel mentioned for the migrants? Do we have a policy? Do we have a system where we know that this city is going to attract, let's say, 1,000 young girls for certain activities? Do we have enough working women's hostel or men's hostel? These are some very already existing systems in there, but we need to bring those things together. So for that, you also need to do a proper assessments of the cities. While planning is being done, it's based, like, a couple of years ago, or when the city started having its own institutional mechanism to guide it. So they created that. But what are we doing? Periodic assessment, and the assessment has to be for different issues, but interwoven, because every issue touches the other issue at some point. So the assessment has to be basically socio-economic, physical infrastructure, everything together. So it's like, and also now specifically for Odisha, you have hazards or the climate change aspects. So you should have something called hazard, risk, vulnerability, capacity assessments. Capacities are also there. Now, if we want to introduce friendly spaces, do we have enough people? And when we have talked about, and what is the quantity of money, what is the amount of funds required for it? And it's, in cities, you have a lot of these corporate entities who have house offices and other things. How do we bring them together? Some government says, okay, like, I mean, if I take for COVID, what did the government do? We were able to create a lot of transit houses. Was it all the money of the government? No, it was the money from the corporate sector also. Because you had a problem statement, you told them what is required, where it is required, they were able to invest. So we also need to have bankable, uh, visible, proper, accountable, and transparent pitch decks to engage with them. And there are also high net worth individuals within the cities who are willing to part with some of money on a regular basis for certain activities. How do we attract them? They all need visible changes which is required. So so that's the first thing which is very, very much required, is the assessments. The second is, we need to also look at people, their social cultural norms, and the environment together. There will you cannot forcefully change the cultural norm of that particular space. But will be these people who require something different. So how do we look at it? Yesterday somebody came and said, oh, you don't have book reading clubs in Bhubaneswar. Somebody started it, but the discourse went off, like, it was not about the book, it was about the book which I read. So we still haven't got there. So how do you inculcate new ideas which create spaces? Then, and I also think it is very, very important that when we are looking at our infrastructure, we properly create infrastructure which would be sustainable and resilient. Somewhere we do not look at the sustainability and resilience. We create infrastructure, but we do not have the O&M work. or we create it on such a space where you have to demolish it tomorrow. So we really need to have that thing. And as Umi and Sneha said, we really need to have more spaces for discussions. We need to have that dialogue, the regular dialogue going on. And it has to be also within the city at a smaller lens. You cannot expect all the city people coming together at one place and discussing how should my transportation should be.
Yeah.
And what is the way I need it. So you need to have those smaller groups. And somewhere we lack is a citizen-centric database. Can we have that? If we are able to create, even we start with small things and keep on populating it to become a full-blown city database, it really happens. I'll give you a small example. Because butcher shops are closed in most of the city areas in Bhubaneswar, it is moving out to the outskirts. And people living on the edges of Bhubaneswar, when they walk down on Wednesdays and Fridays, they see only the goats, the cleaned up goats. Yeah. And when they are putting up that information on the websites for the municipal authorities to take action, they get no response. I mean, just one example I said. So there, somewhere we need to have that citizen-centric redressal system, which is run by the citizens also. Where we do not bring our elected representatives into that fold also many times. So there has to be the whole capacity building, which I think Tathagata ji also mentioned, is very, very important of the functionaries. And with the functionaries, you need to bring in people to sensitize how the functionaries work also.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are overbearing also for our functionaries and they are not able to take it. So we need to bring, that dialogue, talking together each other. We need to create more and more spaces for that rather than just events and big gala functions which attract more and more people to the cities.
Yeah. No, the excellent point in terms of saying that we need to actually create spaces for conversation, something that we have been very instrumental in doing in our rural areas, we have missed in our urban spaces. Our ward committees are not primarily spaces where you see a lot of citizen action happening. Like some of what you were trying to bring in with citizen redressal processes, citizen conversation, naturally has to happen at a ward level. And cities, some of the cities like Kerala, let's say even some of the spaces in Pune, the Mohalla Sabhas in Delhi have been grounds in which some of this conversation have been scooped. But for Odisha, personally, even I have not seen how our ward committees are functioning. And therefore, while we might post some of our grievances online, there is no takers to it because the process of that loop closing has not been established. And I think in urban spaces, that is one calling that we need to very significantly up on. If some of these spaces would have existed, now that we are talking about a vision document, probably the ward committee should have been places where some of this conversation should have erupted. The vision document doesn't need to be online. It needs to be in those kind of open spaces where people are more participating in those kind of discourses. So thank you, Avaji, for this insights into the conversation. And I hope Dr. Chatterji is back and he's able to kind of take my question around the urban challenge funds and how some of these layers can be brought in, because funding is something that has been called out as one of the larger anchors of issues in an urban space.
What was the question? I missed the question on Urban Challenge Fund.
So the question was that something that the audience kind of harped on. The writer talked about lack of funds in terms of self funds, dependencies on the state as well as the central funds. A lot of urban actors see the urban challenge funds as one of the layers in which a lot of action can be brought together. So
Actually, Urban Challenge Fund, the way it is designed, it requires a lot of mobilization of private capital. And because the central government component is only about 25%. So the state government and the private capital has to come into play to access the Urban Challenge Fund. And that has remained one of the biggest challenge is that how many cities are actually being able to access the Urban Challenge Fund? Because Urban Challenge Fund is mainly meant to develop new urban expansions, which would be bankable and through bankable and financially viable projects. So Urban Challenge Fund is not there to meet the day-to-day needs of the cities. So it is for, say, suppose, in Bhubaneswar, there is a new Bhubaneswar plan, it's being mooted. So that is basically a new urban expansion with a lot of IT and other kind of, knowledge intensive industries which are being floated there. So it is basically for development of satellite towns and urban expansions, not exactly to meet the budgetary shortfalls or other kind of city needs. Now, coming to the other big issue, the main point, fact of the matter is that the question is who is really deciding about our urbans? Who is really deciding about our cities? And is it being decided at the city level or the decisions are being taken at the state level? So if when the decisions are being taken at the state level, obviously decisions are being taken at a macro level. So smaller issues, the day-to-day issues are obviously, do not get the kind of visibility or the importance that it would happen if the decisions are taken not at the state government level, but being discussed at the city government level. So that unless that change happens, so then we keep on continuing managing the cities in a sectoral manner, not in a spatially integrated manner. Just like the roads are being managed, the education departments are being managed, water services are being managed. So those are being managed in a sectoral manner, not in a spatial manner, which would demand a spatially integrated governance system. So, but the spatially integrated governance system has got jurisdictions basically only about solid waste management. Most other services are in the hands of either parastatals or privatized or with this requires a lot of concurrence with the state government, whether you call it mobility, you call it water. Those are very fundamental aspects. And that, we are running another web series, discussion series here in INHAF. It's a municipal governance in federal systems. So in that sense, India's municipal governance system, it's kind of very much handicapped compared to most other countries where the city governments are in charge of the cities. But in our cases, it's not the problem of Odisha alone. It is a national issue. It is most of the urban governance issues that is discussed at this, decided at the state government level. The state governments are the biggest actors on the urban stage, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just quickly, just another add-on point. What's your response around the master plans, basically? Because every time we talk about planning, we call it out and we say that it's redundant, it's never prepared. And the way the process of building it is also consultant-driven. It doesn't actually require most of the citizen to input into it. So what are some of your thoughts around it?
Yeah. The point is, we need to think of this issue in two levels. On the one hand, there are some critical infrastructure like a very big trunk pipelines or a metro system, or let's say arterial roads, which you need to have a longer vision, 25, 30, 40 years of vision. And to translate that, you need to have a larger vision, which typically a master plan or a perspective plan would provide. The next question is, how do you incorporate public participation, and how do you incorporate its funding? So, what to me it's necessary is to have one large overarching vision, say for 25 years or 20 years or so, but broken down into smaller, manageable 5-year and then one plans which are linked to the electoral cycles. Because when a master plan is visualized, there would be changes in government. So, and when there is a change in government, there may be change in priorities. So, we need to have some larger vision, but also broken down into 5-year electoral cycles, and thirdly, broken down to yearly budget cycles. So we need to have a cascading type of plan, and plan also needs to be not just a one-time exercise. The planning needs to be a continuous process, and for that again you need to have the institutional capacity to carry on that planning on a continuous basis, and that is where you cannot depend on the consultants. Nowhere else in the world it is being done in that way, because the consultant would come and go because on the specific contract period. So we are trying to reinvent a new kind of urban imagery which had not been done in other places. So we need to fix some of these bigger structural problems.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you so much for this kind of insights, because it kinds of sharpens some of the direction that we need to craft in order to kind of see Odisha urbanized in the rightful spirit and aspirationally. The format of the this webinar will take into cities. Like, we will deep dive into respective cities. We'll look at how Raulkela is looking at urbanization, how beautifully it does it, or Barampur is doing it, how Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, as twin cities of this, how Puri will do it. As we are just heading towards the kind of the last league of some of our conversation, Professor Chatterjee, I just want to bring up, like, what are the two such things that is important for cities to explore, or in some of the city conversation we must explore to understand, and that can probably feed back into the vision document, or in terms of a response to the vision document, is that what kind of voices can come together?
I think we need to take into account the voices from the grounds up. One would be the voices from the ground level political functionaries. So they are the one who are actually closest to the people. And so unless, I mean, they become part and parcel of the discussion, they may not be speaking the language of planning, but I mean, they are the ones who are closest to the people. So that voice needs to be incorporated. That may not be a very sophisticated voice, but nevertheless, it's a very important voice and rooted in the ground reality. The mayors, the councillors. So that voice is very necessary.
I think that's a great point. I think a key stakeholder in an urban space has naturally becomes the elected representatives.
Yeah.
And we haven't had much conversations around those cadre of stakeholder who are like front-ending some of this conversation. Like you said, if they're not aware and conscious about what is happening, we might, as academicians, as experts in the space, we might do a lot of talking, but it'll never percolate to the grassroots level in the truest sense. No, thank you. Thank you for these remarks. And I would kind of take the same questions across the panel with different. So I'll just try to bring in Abhaji, and I would like to hear that as a matter of framework in this webinar, we are taking the route of taking it to different cities and trying to capture voices. How and you brought in the point of the deliberative democratic platforms to be instrumental in urban spaces. Tell us how can we kind of do it, and if there are certain reforms that you would also want to recommend in this journey.
You know, I think the first and foremost thing, I think, as Tathagata Chatterji sir was mentioning, that despite the devolution of power which has happened, we need to do it in the right spirit of the act which we haven't done it properly. And then we also need to have a more strengthened elected representatives who will be able to bring that little bit change at the ward level. Further, I think the Delhi's experiment of the RWAs, somewhere we could bring that here also, but I'm sure there could be, because I have not studied urban governance too much, but still, I find that Kerala, systems are very, very good. They really are able to bring community together for causes, and that's also, it's not just a tokenism, but they are able to get it, and there are spaces for people to go and speak. Unless and until we have that, the champions we have around cities, where people can go and speak, talk to them, somebody is able to hear with them. And the third pillar which I feel is very important in the cities are the academic institutions which are there. They could really make a difference by bringing in a lot much, in terms of research, in terms of ideas, innovations with their students. That's something is also is required. We need to integrate these, and one of the spaces for academic dialogues could be the academic institutions, but with the communities as such, facilitated or promoted by the government itself. And that's how we can bring in. But I think it is more important that we also bring in the clubs which are there around. Those are one space we sometimes forget. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm with the Rotary Club, and I find that they keep on doing small things within the city also, because that's their space of work. They are given certain spaces to work. So we may have to do that whole mapping of people and institutions to identify what type of best institution will work for my city, that city.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to bring in more technology. Use of technology is very, very important.
Yeah.
And but when you use the technology, technological knowledge transfer is also very important, because in cities you will find spaces, you would find people, or within a space, people who do not know how to use it. How will it reach them? That grassroots last mile connectivity has to be thought of before we introduce it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Very rightfully. And I think while we are designing the city chapters of this webinar, we will kind of embed some of these thinking into making those kind of conversation more lively and impactful in the truest sense. Because if you don't have the right set of actors to kind of voice it out, you can do as much as talking. Since this was primarily designed at a launch kind of an understanding. So we wanted experts here. But as I hear some of you speaking, every one of you is talking about having more grassroots level voices coming into it. And what are the potential pathways in which we can bring those seemingly into the process? So thank you, Abhaji, for bringing some of this very nuanced understanding. I wouldn't say that you haven't read enough of urban governance. The way you speak, I wouldn't say that. And like all of us have been urbanist in our life, so I think it's more lived experience that is doing the talking. And one of the questions that has also come up, and I would kind of bring in Daniel G into it, is like the vision document has kind of called out three categories of urban informal workers, and they have said that about sanitation, sewer workers, there's a building and construction workers, and the waste pickers with regards to their health, safety, security, housing. Are there any other welfare measures? So, Daniel ji, I would like to hear your thought. This has come from the audience who are listening to us. So,
Yeah, basically, these are all social security that being provided, building and other construction welfare board, sanitation worker. And I think the worker and the stakeholders are different stakeholders are there. You have gig worker, you have hawkers, you have. So still today, I think we don't have a comprehensive policy for them. Uh, and why it is not happening? Because we don't have a database about these people. There is no database available. You need to create that and do a mapping across the urban area. Uh, and as everybody said, I would also support that. You need to, I think migrant should be the key stakeholders in the entire discourse or the planning process which are happening. And you certainly need an inclusive policy. And immediately, I would say, Preeti, this policy paper, if the government is going to revisit, then this migrant thing need to be incorporated. I think if that is done, and then the list of things may come up like how urban area could also have an employment program for the people. Employment program. I remember Odisha government has budgeted around 1,000 crores, but sorry to say that not a single paisa was actually implemented out of this 1,000 crores to create employment situation. Then you have a housing, rental housing, workers' hostels. These are all are required basic services so that young people can come. And portability, I've already said. Skilling is another area that you need to look at what kind of skilling you require for your city. Then I think there need to be a transition from low paid kind of urban kind of work to high paid. Like, no, you need to invest a lot on that so that you will create a migrant friendly urban policy where actually migrants are going to contribute a lot for the development, for the growth of the city. I would say that much. Incorporate them, identify them, make them visible, talk to them, and then also document their aspiration, I would say. Thank you.
yeah. No, one of the point that we were actually today we were having this conversation, Dr. Bumaji, who is also part of INHAF, we were kind of contemplating and thinking through an urban employment program kind of thing, especially for Odisha. And there we were trying to see, with Kirtiji's direction, trying to understand, is there a union of voices for some of these? To like, you can still think through and talk. But when we say some of these voices need to be represented, do we kind of have that body which holds on to some of these layers in Odisha especially? And are they active in the truest sense?
No, I think I would say because that's one area there is a gap out there because mostly migrants are unorganized migrants and they're fragmented into different kind of places. And uh, after COVID, we thought that government will come back with a policy. Many states, they promised, but till yet, I think Odisha has not come up with a policy for migrant workers. And they promised that we will have a separate migrant policy, and we have provided that note and also draft to the government. But that is one unfinished kind of task government want to do because they have shown the kind of urgency post-COVID. I think Odisha Odisha is more concerned about the distress migration, and we have a task force. But now this task force should look into comprehensively in migrants and out migrant both, and also our urban area. So I would say government understands the plight of migrants, those who are going to other places, but they also need migrants to build their cities. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel ji, for this insights. And I think that brings me to last speaker, Sneha ji, and I would just try to understand that if we are in 20, this is more like a visualization question, and if we are sitting in 2036, what are the three outcomes that would convince us that Odisha has truly
Hello?
transformed cities? Uh,
Hello?
So yeah, so basically when we talk about the outcomes and specifically the urban space, one is definitely the access to all, when I'm talking about the public spaces, it should actually has access for all. I mean, when I say all, it includes children, it includes women, it also includes people with disabilities, elderly, and everyone. Not only the public spaces, but also the infrastructures. Let us say the transports. Let us say even the public buildings. I mean, it's really a matter of pity that even if we have a universal guideline, and if you look into specifically talking about Bhubaneswar, you have Bhubaneswar Development Authority who also has come out with a very beautiful guidelines on the city planning and which talks about the universal design. But unfortunately, even the public buildings are not adhering to it. And I'm really not sure how the plans have been actually kind of sanctioned by the BDA itself to the public buildings which are not having the accessible features. So I would rather say that these are the things which we'll have to actually take that into consideration and see that it is happening. The other thing which I also would like to flag up, Preeti, is regarding the migrant workers that Daniel was talking about. And when there is an adverse situation, let us say the extreme heat wave, which is not allowing even the workers to work in the day, but they need to be like going out and they need to actually seek for the work. And if the government is not coming out with a comprehensive social security mechanism, they are likely to definitely lose their job, lose the wages that they should be earning. And even in those situations, they have talked about the migration portal where they are registering themselves. But is there enough protection system which is actually there to cover the loss that the workers are going to have? For example, things like the parametric incidence or something like that. So the government actually has to think about very vehemently, specifically in the city context I'm talking about, because most of the people have been actually migrating to cities in search of work. So the entire family gets migrate. There are people, I mean, individual, they also do get migrate. So we have to actually think about that, very specifically when we talk about the migrant people thing. The other thing which I also would like to, flag up over here is just not the infrastructures or the public spaces, but the safety concerns. I mean, which is very, very important specifically in a city concern, because people do look up, I mean, the neighboring places, they do look up to the cities as a safe space. They do migrate to the cities for that as well. So not only some kind of income has to be going to be generated, but definitely it is a space where we can with a dignity we can access the work and something like that. So you have to think about that as well. So it is just not like giving our lightings on the street, but the lightings in a particular way, and also the kind of the pavement partitions that we have. Specifically, if you see the kind of partition that recently got actually replaced, which is above the height of any or normal in average people, let us say, and which might create a lot of safety concerns when women are traveling, when adolescents are traveling, and they are using the pavements. So you have to be very, very careful about that. So I think a comprehensive approach is required. And again, I would say, as other speakers have said, that creating space for the voice of people, people, across intersectionality is very much required.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it is an iterative journey across the conversation, how we are positioning, a lot of us are positioning people first approach. And that also kind of sinks in while I'm also looking at how like some of our audience looking at it. There's something exciting. I see that there is a missing of a PPP, which is like lack of a political will, planning, which has to be participatory, and the policy that has to be bottom up. Very nicely summed up, Manish. Thank you for bringing that point and listening. I would say thank you to all the panelists for actually bringing in such nuanced understanding, and the entire team of INHAF, Kirti ji, Dr. Bhuma and Jasna for putting together the rightful logistic around it. And it'll be not enough if I don't take Disha's name. Disha, like everyone would know that she has been that invisible person driving some of this conversation, sitting and listening to it. And so thank you, Disha, for bringing this together for us. And as we come to the closure, I would just request Kirti ji, if you are around.
Very much so.
Yes. So
No, I think I didn't want to summarize anything, but wanted to make a few points very shortly. It was very rich and remarkably thoughtful interaction and conversation. Learned so much. Made something like 60 point notes, and I think hearing people was terrific. I wanted to kind of make 3 or 4 very quick points, Preeti for future. One is this, that, I don't know how we missed it out, but if you're discussing the vision document of 36, there was a need to present the vision document, both factually as well as critically. Because a good number of people are listening outsiders, including me, and therefore they don't really have gone through and seen this document. So that was number one, and I think it would help us very much. Second thing is, because this is such a wonderful set of people here, and I thought, I would be missing an opportunity if I do not invite them to participate in something in which we are engaged. INHAF at the moment is working on what I call urban Manrega, and we're looking at urban Manrega for Odisha. And this is something that Preeti ji mentioned. And this is a serious business. What we're doing is this. We have developed a national program at some point of time. But I think our advice is this, that this would be better taken at the state level. And therefore, we're trying to develop a what we call sustainable urban employment guarantee scheme for Orissa. We have people working on it. My colleague Bhuma is here. We have a very young researcher who's working with us. And there are a large number of issues and points that we would like to share with you. So I would want to constitute this 4 or 5 people we had today as some kind of bouncing board. We would like to come back and share with you what we're doing. And I'm sure you would have not only lots of advice and guidance, you also could tell us that these are the people who would be willing to help. And this is a live project, something we would like to put together in the next 6 months' time and hand over to Government of Odisha that this is what we are thinking in terms of urban Manrega for Odisha. So it's not an empty talk, it's not a webinar, it's not a meeting. This is action program. We're essentially putting together a policy document which should government look into. So that's just number 2. But number 3 point is something that Dr. Tathagata mentioned, and that is this Urban Challenge Fund. I was one of the few people who 15 days after the announcement in the budget wrote about 6-page letter to about 20 people that here was a great opportunity where we as citizens, where we as people, where we as professionals, where we as civil society tell government what to do. 1 lakh crore is not a small amount of money. Response to my request was 0. No one came forward. And I think we created conditions where government had to act. The first time when the fund was announced, it was open-ended, it was free, but there was no one to take it. And in government, you can't really kind of do without action for a long time. And therefore, we force government to create framework within which the fund could operate. I personally feel there is still an opportunity if professional civil society could get together and say, this is how 1 lakh crore urban challenge fund should be utilized, it will be heard. That's my understanding. I don't think government has bright ideas. Essentially, it does what it always does. This is what has happened. And I think there's a need to question the framework. And there's a need to come up with specific examples, specific directions in terms of what could be done. 1 lakh crore is lots of money. And especially 1 lakh crore is to be used as something with which you will leverage other fund and resources. So that's my another request that if there is a matching wavelength, we are willing to work on this. I'm willing to find a way that we could work further. Because I think, if nothing else, I thought if civil society can put together what to do, we essentially have an opportunity to communicate civil society vision of what kind of cities we want. And it's an instrumentality which we use. So that's the second, I think, suggestions that I have for this group. The third thing that I wanted to mention very quickly is master planning. And I'm very glad so much was talked about this. We have done a fair amount of work in last 9 months on the master plan of Chennai city, because in Chennai, we are working on climate change project. And we at the moment are in the next month or so in a process of putting together a document we already have done, something like 150-page document on what master plan should be. What should master plan of Chennai be? And we essentially are bringing in new ideas. We said all master planning essentially is a land use planning. All master planning is more or less infrastructure development planning. Cities are no longer residential dormitories. And therefore, the local functions, municipal functions, cannot be confined to water and sanitation and infrastructure. Cities have a new avatar. They're looked as engines of economic growth. And if they're engines of economic growth, someone must plan for that growth. It must be included. How do we do that sort of a thing? So there's a first challenge that we are coming up with. Second challenge we are coming up with is asking question that informal sector economy in urban areas is a major thing. It generates 30% of GDP, employs large number of people. Cost per job is very small. And all we've done up till now for last 30, 40, 50 years, what to do with slums, how to provide, I think, housing, that is not enough. You've got to look in the master planning exercise, the whole vision and the perspective of what do you do with informal sector economy in our villages. It's not a residual thing. It's not a marginal thing. It's a big thing. And therefore, how do you incorporate that is the third thing we are trying to look at. Fourth thing we're trying to look at is the technology dimension. Cities must be seen in the context of how do you govern them. And when you look at governance, you've got to look at technology. It's starting from, I like someone saying it very beautifully, that Rajiv Gandhi's 15% reaching the ground has changed dramatically to 90% because technology had made that possible. And it's a remarkably important kind of thing. And I think we've got to look at that sort of a thing. And once again, I'm talking about this as a live project, not as a thought. And I thought we could come back to you on this. And my last point is, I'm very glad someone mentioned Jaga Mission. I don't know whether any of you knew, but we did 5 webinars on Jaga Mission with UN Habitat as a sponsor and Cities Alliance as a sponsor. You can't talk about Odisha without talking about Jaga Mission. And I personally feel there's a great need to look at Jaga Mission systemically, not only in terms of how it's solving the problem of slums or slum dwellers, but the holistic framework it's evolved is dramatically important. And I think we've got to look at cities from that framework, from that instrument as well. And I think hopefully, Preeti, in one of our remaining 5 events, we would bring this up. How do you look at and I'm calling Jaga mission is micro, it's not as a macro in itself, but in the macro context to the macro context of urbanization and city planning. Because what has happened in Odisha is absolutely remarkable. It has understood what the grassroots processes are. It's understood in terms of what do you require, the transition stage of economy, what is required. I think, when migration has to be understood and provided for. So this with very quick few points, I think, I would thank again everyone. Thank again, Preeti ji. And we look forward to seeing you again in the second event, which should take place in the next few weeks' time. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirtiji, and thank you everyone for staying. I see.
I think we'll reach you at some point of time. The migration is something very important. We want to learn from you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Abha ji,
thank
and
you.
thank you, Sneha ji, and thank you, Dr. Dr. Chatterji. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.